Alright, hey friends, welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Graves, and today we're going to be taking a look at some fascinating stories from the ancient world about different kinds of hopping insects. I'm really excited for this one, so let's get started. So the source for this video is this great book called Insects and Invertebrates in Classical Antiquity by Ian Beavis. This is a great book. I definitely recommend it. He has a whole chapter where he talks about these insects, so grasshoppers, locusts, etc. I'm going to be kind of lumping them all together today, partly because I'm not an entomologist and I'm not great at differentiating between them, but also because the Romans and the Greeks weren't great at differentiating either. A lot of their terms are a little fuzzy and kind of overlap, and in a lot of these stories, it's not clear exactly which species they're talking about anyway, so just keep that in mind. And if you are a bug expert, please enlighten me with your wisdom in the comments. Generally, in the ancient world, critters like locusts were considered pests. They were a real threat to people's crops. And what's interesting and kind of weird is that you can actually see that in the legal history of a bunch of different cities and countries. So, for example, in Cyrene, they had a law on the books that prescribed locust collections 3 times a year. So 3 times a year, everyone was legally required to all go out into the fields, I guess, and collect up a bunch of locusts for extermination. Similarly, in Syria, everyone had a quota of locust bodies that they were required to turn in by the end of the year. So I guess everybody had to go out and hunt up a bunch of locusts, again, for the purposes of extermination. So grasshoppers, locusts, and the like were also considered potential food, but in reality, if you could get away with not eating them, you definitely would. They were considered to be food only for people who were really poor, destitute, have no other options, and or for people who are foreign, or for animals. So grasshoppers were used regularly as like bird feed, but it was just seen as a food that was dirty, a low class, not good for you. And we actually have a story from Diodorus about a desert dwelling tribe named the Acridophagi, and these people eat locusts on a regular basis. It's a staple of their diet, but he describes them as being very poor, very primitive, and also prone to horrifying diseases. So I'm going to read to you a little passage about this, but just warning that this is very graphic and gross, so maybe don't watch this part if you're in the middle of lunch. Accordingly, the food of this people at the moment and thereafter consists of these animals, for they possess no herds, nor do they live near the sea, nor do they have at hand any other resources. As for the manner in which they end their lives, not only is it astounding, but extremely pitiful. For when old age draws near, there breed in their bodies winged lice, which not only have an unusual form, but are also savage and altogether loathsome in aspect. The affliction begins on the belly and the breast, and in short time spreads over the whole body. And the person so affected is at first irritated by a kind of itching and insists on scratching himself a bit. The disease at this point offering a satisfaction combined with pain. But after this stage, the animals, which have been continuously engendered more and more in the body, break out to the surface, and there is a heavy discharge of a thin humor, the sting of which is quite unbearable. Consequently, the man who is in the grip of the disease lacerates himself with his nails the more violently, groaning and moaning deeply. And as his hands tear at his body, such a multitude of the vermin pours forth that those who try to pick them off accomplish nothing, since they issue forth one after another as from a kind of vessel that is pierced throughout with holes. And so these wretches end their lives in a dissolution of the body after this manner, a miserable fate, meeting with such a sudden reversal of fortune either by reason of the peculiar character of their food or because of the climate. So you can see some nice little xenophobia here, where Diodorus is assuming that anybody who lives in a different climate or has a different diet from him is prone to suffering from horrible diseases because of this. And they're literally being eaten inside out by insects. It's very nasty. And you can also see from this that it seems like the ancient Greeks and Romans have a pretty negative opinion of grasshoppers and locusts and the like. However, we do have several poems that are in praise of grasshoppers that were kept as pets. It seems like this was a fairly common thing in the ancient world for people to keep grasshoppers as pets for their noise. They liked the sound or the song that they made. They would keep them in little cages made of reeds, and occasionally when they died, their owners would have little tombs made, which is really sweet, and would commission epitaphs and things written for these grasshoppers as well. So we're gonna read a couple of those. I'm not gonna share with you the whole list, so if you're interested, then I would recommend that you definitely check out that book that I mentioned at the beginning of the video for the references to the full list. For her locust, the nightingale of the fields, and her cicada that resteth on the trees, one tomb hath little Myro made, shedding girlish tears, for inexorable Hades hath carried off her two pets. This clay vessel, set beside the far-reaching road, holds the body of Democritus's locust that made music with its wings. When it started to sing its long evening hymn, all the house rang with a melodious song. So I'm just really touched. I think those are so beautiful, these little poems that were just written for these pet crickets. It's also really strange that on the one hand, crickets and locusts could be so feared and hated in the ancient world, but on the other hand, people could still keep them as pets and they could pay good money to other people to write these beautiful poems. So it's just very strange, but very beautiful. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Special thank you as always to subscribers and to Patreon members. I hope to see all of you again next week. Kairote.